I want to invite you to offering. I know about the needs of the church, and so I might make the case that you need to give big gifts because this church has lots of needs. But one of the things I don't want to leave you with is the idea of guilt. Although that is an item that the church regularly uses, guilt, to make people give offerings. I would rather ask you to be in a relationship with God, with Jesus your Savior, and the Spirit that calls you to give gifts. And I invite you to calculate a percentage of your income and give that. It may, as I remember when I was 24, I tried to be a tither, and I said, whoa, whoever gives 10%? And so I started with 0.5%, 1%. And then I desired to grow above that. I'm still working on my knowledge of Winifred McKever, who talked about his percentage was 50%. Maybe someday I'll grow to what Winifred is able to give. But each of us can choose out of our positive, loving relationship with God to give as God provides for us. And so I invite you this day to give an offering not only for the good of the church, but for your relationship with God as God calls you to be in the work that God's doing in this world. Let us receive an offering.
Eternal companion and creator, there is a silence that is rich and fertile. It is a silence deep within the dark earth in which seeds of faith and sprouts of belief grow. There is a silence pressed alongside the darkest moments of our lives that are filled with what becomes new and fresh one day. There is a silence in the darkest night, standing alone as we are alone, carrying an embrace that will uplift, renew, and restore our hearts. This day may we be in silence. May we take the time for silence. May we receive your gifts in silence. These things we seek, Lord, in prayer as our Master taught us to pray, and as now we sing. Creator God, we bless your name. May your reign come, your will be done, here on this earth as it is in heaven. Creator God, we bless your name.
All right, now we get to find out, is this working? Am I turned on? Yay. It's always nice to get turned on in church. Hey, there's all kinds of ways to feel good about stuff. So, first of all, the order of service today still says the sower. That is not the parable I'm doing, just in case you had missed that already. So here's a little history. About 500 or so years, actually 580 years, before the time of Jesus, the Assyrian Empire goes through Judea, captures all of the prominent Jews, the leaders, the Levites, the people, the Kohanim, the leaders of the temple, takes them off to Babylon, keeps them in captivity for 50 years. Meanwhile, while they're hauling all these people away, they are tearing down the temple. That is the destruction of the first temple. They just throw it rock from rock. There are psalms that talk about this. They stomp through them, they tear down the banners, they totally desecrate the space. Meanwhile, while they're doing this, all the rich Jews, or well-to-do Jews, gather up as much as they can and run like crap to Egypt because they don't want to be under Assyrian rule. This is important later on because this is why when Mary and Joseph flee from Herod's soldiers, they go to Egypt. There's a Jewish community there. And there has been for 500 years by this time. So some 30 years after all this, the Assyrians send the Jewish leaders back to Judea and say, okay, you're under the empire and we're going to give you a governor and he's going to make all the rules and you're going to go ahead and go back there. And they rebuild the temple. But in this 50-year meantime, the middle-class Jews, the working-class Jews, the people who didn't have anywhere else to go, the lower order priests who were not important enough to be exiled to Babylon and not wealthy enough to run to Egypt, got together and they had already rebuilt a temple. They couldn't do it in Jerusalem because the Assyrians were standing there with like weapons and things saying, yeah, no. So they went to this place called Mount Gerizim. And it's in that middle space between the Galilee in the north, and Judea in the south. It's the place called Samaria. They built this temple. They reinstituted temple worship. Now, the Jews in Babylon didn't do that. They formed synagogues, and the Jews in Egypt formed synagogues. They knew that the temple was in Jerusalem, period, end of story, nothing else. The Jews who were left in Judea and went into Samaria and built their own temple were like, we're doing what we think is right. But 530-ish or so before the time of Jesus, BCE, all the guys come back from Babylon and say, you are anathema, you are traitors, you are no longer Jews, you are vile and despicable, we will have nothing more to do with you. This whole area between the faithful Jews up in Galilee who just sat there and went, we're not paying any attention to the Samaritans, to the people in Judea, and we're good Jews, and we'll go to synagogue, and we'll wait and see what happens. And the people in Judea who were like, whatever you say, you have the weapons. And the people in Samaria who said, well, we're trying to be good Jews. The people in Samaria were now declared to be not of our people. These are the Samaritans. You have to understand this to know that when Jesus tells this story, 500 or so years later, the Samaritans had been the N-word of the Jewish real world for 500 years. Not like we have that kind of anything going on like that here. So you can see where I'm going now. So Jesus tells this story. Going back to the Egyptians, there are stories of three. Papa bear, mama bear, baby bear, right? The first one is too hard. The second one is too soft. But the third one is always just right. So this is the way the stories go. These stories are all over the place. They're in China. They're in Egypt. Human beings tell these stories. These three people, too much, too little, just right. Too stupid, too smart, just right. Too greedy, too political, just right. Whatever they are, there's always the just right is the last one, and the just right is us. It's supposed to be us. So when Jesus starts to tell this story and the Judeans are listening to him talk about the man going down, oh, I forgot about the other part, history, other part. The Romans are now in charge. During Jesus' period, they're under oppression again, but this time it's the Romans. The Romans improved the road system. They did all kinds of civic improvements and building stuff. Jesus himself worked as a scaffolding maker for building projects in the empire. That's the kind of carpenter he was. He built scaffolding so that they could build buildings, and then he would come take down the scaffolding, and he and his buddies would haul the scaffolding pieces off to the next building project. Anyway, Jesus was probably pretty buff. We should be aware of this. Because he's always portrayed as somehow terribly decimated, and he's like, no, he's a pretty buff dude. But when he's telling this story, the roads in Judea could only be walked on by people who had Roman permission, which was basically all the Jews and all the Judeans. I mean, the Romans were not wanting to be mean about this. But the reason you had to have a Roman chit to walk on the roads is that was how they arrested robbers and brigands who figure in this story, so it kind of matters. And because the Judeans were the way they were about the Samaritans, they had to deal with the Romans that Samaritans were not allowed to use the Roman roads in Judea. They had to use the cattle trails and the back roads. So we have several things going on in this story. Man walks down from Jerusalem to Jericho. Well, in order to do that, he had to be one of the good Judeans. So he had to be one of us. So one of us gets beaten up by robbers, who were the Romans are supposed to be protecting us from these guys. So this is an example of, the Romans are failing. This is another thing that the Judeans would love. It's a story where the Romans are incompetent. We like those. Okay, so the Romans are incompetent, and our good guy gets beaten up and left for dead. Along comes a priest. Well, the priests are the Kohanim. They are a sect of the tribe of Levi. They serve in the temple. They have very important religious duties. Touching a dead body makes them unclean, and they can't go in the temple until after they've had a long and complicated purification ceremony. We understand why a priest would not want to touch a dead body, but still. Then the Levite comes along. The Levite, or the rest of the people of Levi, they also serve in the temple, often as musicians and caretakers and stuff like that. They actually don't own any land. So they're supposed to be paid out of a tithe. Thank you, Gene, for reminding us of tithe. They're supposed to be paid out of a tithe of everybody else's property. So with the priests. They get some of the temple sacrifice stuff, but the Levites get paid out of a tithe. And same thing, he can't go in the temple and do his job if he touches a dead body. So he's like, no, I'm not touching that. And he walks away on the other side. Well, then comes number 3, who's just right. He's going to be one of us. He's a good guy. He's going to come and do the right thing. It's a who? It's a what? This is not allowed. This is not okay. First of all, he can't even be on the damn road. This isn't the Romans being incompetent. This means they gave him a chit to travel. They're not supposed to do that. Wait a minute. Now remember the guy who asked the question? He's a lawyer. This isn't somebody who does temple law, although he could. This is somebody who understands Roman law. He is a lawyer. He's asking this, he's cross-examining Jesus. He's basically putting Jesus on the stand, raise your right hand, swear on the, oh yeah, I swear by me. Anyway, he's trying to get Jesus to look a little bit smaky here. Come on, you don't really know the whole law, right? What is the law and the prophets, and what is the highest law? And Jesus basically turns it around on the lawyer and says, you're a lawyer, you know the law. Yeah, I know the law. The word for neighbor in Hebrew that's used in Leviticus 19:18, which is what the lawyer was quoting, is ra'ah, which means companion or fellow traveler. It can mean good friend or buddy. It can mean that other person who's over there. It always begs the question of why we have to have a commandment to love your neighbor. If they're good buddies, it's already there. And one of the suggestions is that this is the fellow who's got the herd next door, and you guys are competing for resources in the desert, which is hard. And so it would be so much easier if you had his flock and he wasn't there. But you have to be commanded to love your neighbor as yourself and share the resources. As a sidebar, sometimes when I preach this text, I remind everybody that if we really loved our neighbors the way we love ourselves, most of our neighbors would move away. So bear that in mind, that you are in fact called by God to love yourself. So, end sidebar, back to the main story here. We've got this guy who is asking these details and saying, okay, so who's my neighbor? The word in Greek, plesion, basically means the fellow nearby. It just means it's from the word for near. So it's whoever's nearby. So who is really my neighbor? By this time, of course, we understand that the word has taken on more than just the person nearby. It means, who am I supposed to treat with this kind of loving kindness thing? Who merits this? And so Jesus tells this story. And in the story, we have this person who shows up and picks up the good Judean, who was supposed to be the good guy, but instead is the victim, and treats him with grace and honor, surrendering his own supplies, which he has on the road with him because he probably can't stop and get any. So he's going to have his first aid stuff for his own injuries. He's using his own stuff. He's giving his own money to take care of this guy. And then he goes on and asks for no reward. And then Jesus says, so who behaved like a neighbor. That's not what the commandment says. And the nomikos can't say it. He can't say it. He can't even say the name. He can't say, the one who was nice to him. He can't even say the word. Jesus is saying to this group of people, those people you despise, take them as a model. Look at what they have endured and survived and dealt with, and look at how they offer you grace. Oh, by the way, yes, there's a version of this interpretation that says this is like grace from God, which you also don't deserve and merit, and which you can't always explain where it's going to come from. So you can go with that one too. But one of the things Jesus is saying is, there's your model, folks. It isn't about who the person is, it's about how they behave. It doesn't matter whether they are one of us or one of them. Good behavior is what we're after here. Treating each other well is what we're after here. Treat each other well. Treat yourself well. Stop making it about us and them. This is not terribly what the Jewish people were waiting to hear from this lovely storyteller guy who everybody thought was so wonderful. They were not standing there waiting to be told, take this most despised group of people. This is a fairly well-off Samaritan. He's got goods and stuff on his donkey. And he's got a donkey. And he's on the Roman road, so he must have had enough money to get a Roman chit. So, yeah. But go to those despised people as an example. I found something this week that was so appropriate to this. It was a post or tweet reposted on Facebook from a person or place called Absurdist Words. It goes like this. White supremacy is kind of like high fructose corn syrup. Very few people would purchase a bottle of it for themselves, but it's cheap, palatable, effective, unhealthy, and is an ingredient in just about everything. To me, the experience of opening my eyes to white supremacy was like realizing that HFCS, high fructose corn syrup, was a component in everything I picked up off the shelf at the supermarket, even in things you wouldn't expect. Just a constant refrain of, seriously? It's in this too? If you don't really care and aren't actively looking for it, you likely won't find it. You'll just consume it thoughtlessly. Those who are adversely affected, though, will be rigorous in identifying it because a failure to do so is harmful. They will look harder and find more. There are so many ways to look at this parable, and all of us are free to find our own interpretations in it. I want to look at that one place there where the nomikos can't say the word. White supremacy and racism in our culture do not make us racists. Like Jesus, I'm trying to say, don't worry about the damn label. Don't call people names. The nomikos is calling the Samaritan out of his name, quite literally. He cannot say the word. But what Jesus wants you to look at is the behavior. And I am saying that in all of our systems of reality, there are elements of racism and elements of white supremacy that we don't see, most of us. There are some of us who are dealing with it on a constant level. But most of us don't see it because it doesn't bother us. It doesn't hurt us. It doesn't poke us in the side and say, not really you. So it's harder for us to find. We are called to look harder. We are called to remember and be like those who are damaged by white supremacy and look for it with more intensity, because we are the ones who perpetrate it. Whether we mean to or not. It isn't a choice that we set out to get up in the morning and say, oh, I think I'll be racist today. Very few people do that. There are some, sadly, still, who do that. But not very many. Most people get up in the morning and put on their socks and say, "Where's my coffee?" And they are not planning to be racist or ageist or sexist or fat shame anybody or any of those things. We don't plan that. But the culture at large and the world we live in and the systems that we are part of include it. And so it's there unless we look for it and pull it out. It's really hard. Because there's nothing poking us to do that, except Jesus saying, go be like those people, the ones you don't think about, the ones you don't want to like. Think about the homeless that John brought up a couple weeks ago, who in their camp take care of each other. Think about the people who we just don't really like very much, but they're sometimes showing us ways to be in the world that are a little healthier than we might like. Some of the people we don't like are actually trying to be helpful, maybe in ways that are ineffective. It's always nice when the Romans are incompetent, but they did build the roads. So, we could learn from them a little bit. So the trick we're dealing with these issues of ageism, racism, all this stuff that we do to one another, is how to find those things and tease them out of our systems of existence while recognizing that an awful lot of people, especially people who look like me, are going to be incredibly sensitive to the idea that I might be racist. And so working more and more on the fact that this is systemic. It's not intentional most of the time. It's not most people saying, I don't like to have that kind of thing. I don't want that to happen. It's mostly people saying, well, that's just the way things work. I don't understand why you have a problem with it. It's like high fructose corn syrup. When we started looking for it, it came up a couple of years ago. This tweet is from exactly a year ago. But a few years ago is when this hit the fan. Oh man, high fructose corn syrup is bad. People started taking it out. Oreos got rid of it entirely. But then there were a few people who figured out that if you named it something else, you could still use it. So all kinds of names have turned up. This is part of the whole point. When we are looking at this story, one of the things Jesus is making very, very clear is that we all have some element of, these are my people, and y'all are okay over there where y'all are there, but I don't want to be part of y'all. We have an us and them. This parable is saying, cross that line. I am probably taking too long, because my timing is not always on. So I will leave us with this thought. White supremacy is like high fructose corn syrup. If we want to be healthy as people of God, we have to go look for it. Go look.
I went to Phillips Theological Seminary for a conference hosted by the Disciples of Christ Historical Society. The conference was covering racism and reconciliation and what that looks like in the disciples. If you don't know, the history of the disciples of Christ also has an element of racist ideology. Our founders, Stone and Campbell, had an opportunity at their highlight of their being to stand up against slavery. Campbell said, slavery is wrong. It is terrible how we treat our slaves. However, the scriptures in the New Testament don't say anything negative about slavery. They don't say we should abolish slavery. So Campbell decided, I'm just not going to say anything about slavery because the New Testament says nothing about slavery except for that we can do it. Then that was Campbell. Stone, on the other hand, also despised slavery. Stone said slavery's bad. This is terrible. However, if we free all the slaves, it might be harmful for society because chaos will ensue. So I shall keep my mouth shut on slavery as well, because it's better for the entire society as a whole if we just stay how we are. Friends, I challenge you to look where racism is, but we often don't see it there. That time at the conference, I've read Campbell and Stone's history. It's part of seminary work, and it's there, but it never really hit me in the face until this conference. Just talking about it, open and in front of everyone. We were all made aware of what our history looked like and then we talked about how do we make a change. Well, one change that we've made as an entire institution is right here at the table. This table is for everyone. We do not restrict the table. When Jesus came, Jesus broke the bread and he blessed it and he said, "Take and eat. This is my body given for you." And likewise, with the wine, he poured it out and he said, "Take and drink. This is the blood of the new covenant." Friends, I say that as we take and as we eat and we drink of the covenant, let us remember to search for the racism and the gestures that hurt others and the systems and the places that we might not normally see them. Holy Father, I'm so thankful for this table, for this covenant that you gave, because it's not just for me. I don't deserve it. It's for everyone. Every single human being on this planet is welcome at this table, regardless of where they're from, what they might think they believe, or what we believe about them. They are welcome, and I am thankful. Amen.
Well, we go forth, and this is where it really makes a difference. What we've experienced together, may we take with us on that road to reach out and to remember what a neighbor truly is. Let us go forth in Jesus' name. Amen. There we go.